Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I want to talk to you about the mid-season finale of Star Trek Prodigy. It was called A Moral Star Part 2. And as it starts, we see that Diviner, now aboard the Protostar, is really upset that he doesn't have the Protostar core. And when Gwyn attacks him and tells him to leave her friends alone now that he has the ship, he manages to take control of her weapon, her, like, I don't know what you would call it, the one that she can manipulate, I guess, with her mind, and stop her from using it against him. And he basically tosses her across the room before setting course for the mine to retrieve the star, which he assumes was taken off the ship before he got control of it. Meanwhile, back at the mines, Dahl and the crew are trying to get things back in order. And the miners, who are now free, are excited to learn that they can actually communicate with each other, because they have access to the universal translator that's in the area. Rock figures out how to fix things when the engineer can't, while he tries to keep back the mine's security bots, which are still active. Dahl uses his communicator and one of the miners' anklets to rig up a wider version of the universal translator so that he can get everybody to run to the ship all at once without having to go around and tell everybody individually. And this is occurring just as Dreadnought arrives and gets his ass kicked by the miners, including the cat being from the premiere, which is very cool. But he doesn't get his ass kicked before he's able to transmit the coordinates of the core to the Diviner, who beams it up and flies off with it. The crew and the miners chased after Diviner in the Diviner's old ship to rescue Gwyn. Back on the Protostar, we see that Janeway hadn't actually turned bad, and she flips the script on Diviner to retake the ship. So apparently Gwyn had programmed her beforehand so that she couldn't be turned or anything or used against the crew, and she was just faking it. She also was upgraded a little bit, I guess, so that she could be a little bit more formidable as a combatant, as you will, against Diviner or Dreadnought or whoever might challenge her or the crew aboard the ship. She ends up wounding the Diviner by, I guess, tearing away his part of his suit that keeps fluid running to him, that helps him stay healthy. I don't know. So he's wounded, but he tells Gwyn that he's come back in time to save their planet from being destroyed. And she, at that point, decides she wants to listen to him and hear him out, because up to that point she's thought that he and she were the only two of their kind. So she freezes Janeway and hears him explain. Dahl, meanwhile, who's been waiting for Gwyn to drop the shield so that he and the crew could beam over, decides to disable the Protostar shields by targeting the shield emitters with the weapons of the ship that he and the crew are on, so that they can go aboard her to see why, well, among other things, to see why Gwyn hasn't dropped the shields yet. And as this is occurring, Diviner is showing Gwyn her world in the holodeck. He shows her not only how it looks in the present, but how it will look in 50 years due to a civil war that was touched off after Starfleet made first contact on behalf of the Federation. I guess there was a faction that wanted to join, a faction that didn't, and civil war broke out. So he blames Starfleet for this, or at least considers them to be the catalyst and wants to prevent first contact from happening so that their world doesn't tear itself apart. And his plan for doing that is to go to Starfleet and have them welcome the Protostar back into the fleet, at which point he would activate some kind of device that's already on the ship, which would infect the rest of Starfleet and destroy it from within. But Gwyn hears this and says that he can't do that. Starfleet is a force for good, and it doesn't make it right. You know, what happened to his world doesn't make it right for him to cause another tragedy. And that he needs to talk it out with Starfleet and explain to them, look, when you come to our world, it ends up causing a civil war that destroys the planet. Don't make first contact. But he says the time for talk is over and turns to leave the holodeck, at which point Dahl shows up to challenge him, but he pretty much isn't very good at that. And he ends up getting grabbed by the scruff of his shirt. But at that point, Zero shows up and tells Diviner that they aren't going to let Diviner harm their friends. And they unleash their, I don't know what you would call it, their force, their true self upon him. And, you know, they're Medusan. And of course, when you look on a Medusan directly, you go mad. The only reason the crew doesn't is because they've always been contained in that ball. When they do this, it does in fact drive the Diviner mad and take him down, but unfortunately, Gwen gets a look at Zero in a reflection from Dahl's comm badge, even though she was trying not to look. And it kind of drives her mad as well. But with the Diviner defeated, Janeway and the rest of the crew show up to pick up the pieces. Janeway then explains in a monologue that the miners are learning to control their new ship as Diviner scrounges about in exile alone with no power and no anything. Gwen, having only seen Zero in a reflection, recovers, thank goodness, losing only her memories of that one event, which is just excellent because the character is awesome. The crew then sets course for Starfleet, and when they do, the Protostar's warp signature is detected by the helmsman on Admiral Janeway's ship, some distance away. So the real Janeway is out there, and she says, that's the third time. 1 or 2 times doesn't necessarily mean anything, but 3 times means this is an actual pattern. Set course for the last known location. We're going to reclaim our ship. And then she says, we're coming, Chakotay. So that's where the episode ended, and it won't be back for a while now. That was the mid-season finale. And I was blown away by this episode. Blown away. I've been blown away by this whole series. Every episode has been really good. This episode is an unqualified masterpiece. You could look at it and say, well, they cut some corners. They had some beats that were a little convenient or maybe a little too neat and tidy, but it is a kids show, so I'm fine with that. And in so doing those things, it gave the audience, me anyway, exactly what we wanted, exactly what I wanted. All the beats were excellent, all the moments were excellent, all the character stuff was exactly what you'd want. John Noble is fantastic as Diviner. He's not at all one-dimensional. He's not a mustache-twirling villain. He's not very sympathetic, but you understand his motivation and that he's just become embittered by what happened, which is kind of understandable. But he, you know, veers over into cruelty territory in his methodology at trying to, I guess, fix what happened. So it's hard to find him sympathetic, but a very good character. Not at all one-dimensional or shallow, portrayed excellently by John Noble. The Gwyn character is well written and well acted as well. Just a masterpiece, I think, of character creation and execution. The Rock character is great. The actress who does the voice is really good. The other characters are decent. Janeway has been on this show the same Janeway we knew from before. It's like she never went away. She hasn't, Kate Mulgrew hasn't missed a step. It's like she's been doing the character all along. The closing monologue in this episode, it's stunning to me that this monologue was written for a kids show because it's very adult. It's very Starfleet. It's very Federation. It's very Janeway. It's just incredible. It's just as adult as any other monologue anywhere else in Star Trek. She talks about what the crew has gone through, how they've changed, how they've evolved, how they've grown, and says that, they are each a prodigy in their own right. The score is incredible. The music comes in at the right time. It fits the emotions. It's not haphazard. It's well crafted. It's the animation is fantastic. This show is just amazing. I was sobbing at the end of this episode when the real Janeway shows up and everything falls into place. And it's so Star Trek, it's not even funny. It's the best Star Trek in decades. Just about decades. It's one of the best shows on TV right now, hands down. So I don't know what more to say. The showrunner needs to be complimented. The writers need to be complimented. The voice cast needs to be complimented. They all really need to take a bow. This is a fantastic show. It's excellent Star Trek. You're missing out if you're not watching this show. It's just excellent. And that's all there is to it. So I will be back with reviews of the episodes for the rest of the season once it comes back. Until then, of course, I wish you peace and long life.